Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Game from Scratch, and today we are going to talk about the future of the Unity game engine. Why is this? Well, right now, Unite Copenhagen is going on, and at the keynote speech, they did a 2-hour presentation of all that is new and great in the world of Unity. And then they released the slides of that presentation, and that's what we're going to go through right now. Now, of course, I will link you to the full 2-hour presentation, but what I'm going to do is instead focus on the things that really jumped out to me, the most exciting things about what are coming in Unity, and most of this is broken down into two phases. The stuff that are coming in Unity 2019.3, which could be coming very, very soon. It's in beta 4 right now, I believe. And then into 2020 and beyond kind of stages. So most of the things here are now either kind of coming almost immediately, often in experimental versions, or in future versions. So without further ado, let us jump in. Again, we're going to be glossing over things to keep this down to a reasonable amount of time. And if you want to get into more detail, jump into the full keynotes. Again, they go on for 2 hours. We're going to try and do it in many times less than that. All right, so here we go. A big part of this is all about DOTS. We're moving towards DOTS, which is data-oriented technology stack. This is basically a collection of technologies, and you can see them down here. C#, which kind of always existed, ECS, or Entity Component System, the Burst Compiler, which is for creating and using a subset of C# for making it super fast, and then the jobs compiler, which is for making things parallel friendly. So that is kind of the future of where Unity is going. This is replacing the mono behavior approach, and instead you're going to work with entities. The problem is all of these various different subsystems need to be replaced to work with dots, and you're going to see that is a major part of what the future holds. On top of that, we've got improvements across the board. This most exciting one is this very first one they talk about, Unity Live Link. Unity Live Link is very cool. This could also be called hot reload or hot swapping. Basically, what it allows you to do is deploy your app to your local development environment, not to end users, but to people on your own network while you're working on it. They can have a build of it running on their phone or on their machine, and then you can sit there in the Unity editor and tweak scene values and have them automatically update in real time on those deployed devices. So if you wanted to tweak the lighting in the scene or change the color of something or texture on something, you can. And then it will hook up in live real time. So this is a way of doing quick iterations and changes while you're actually seeing your game run without having to go through the whole debug, build, link, deploy cycle to make it work. Live Link is very cool, coming in 2019.3 as an experimental version. It means it's probably going to break all the time, and have no expectations to use it in a production project. Again, we've got a lot of things coming in the dots front, and one of the biggest problems is you got to move from this mono behavior approach to the dots. So game object is not the way you do things anymore. Instead, you use dots. The problem is 95% of the community does not have a clue how to use dots. It's not particularly well documented. It's not particularly done. There aren't a lot of tutorials out there, and frankly, it's harder. So what we've got here is they've created a conversion tool in experimental version in 2019.3. What this is going to do is allow you to harness the power of dots as Unity converts game objects to entities for you. Pretty cool, and there's visualization for all conversions and an improved user experience. So that is in experimental versions. Expect Yar to be dragons, because that's going to be interesting. Now, one of the cool things here is this whole entities thing, the underlying part of dots, the burst compiler, the C# job system, and ECS, that is all considered production ready in 2020.1. So that is the future. It's 2020.1. So that is when all of these things are going to lose their experimental or preview tags or whatever and become supported and ready for use in real games. Now, some of these things, like I think the burst compiler is already in production, so it's just kind of a formalized that the whole stack is available. We've got, and this is going to be a common theme going through this, we've got a lot of things that are implemented specifically for dots. Number one is netcode. Netcode is what you can think of when you've got, when you've got to talk between a client and a server and synchronize that, or between a client and a client. That's ultimately netcode that does that. They're building a dots-based netcode in 2020.1, simply use framework for building network games. It's dot-based from the ground up. So we're going to have a new system for doing game programming, network game programming other than UNet. Dots physics, this was announced back at GDC this year. Unity has their own physics system coming up, and then Havix has their own dots-based physics system as well. So new physics engines that are dots compliant coming in 2019.3 there. And we've also got a new audio system coming in 2020.1 in experimental form. There's a high-performance audio engine including events prioritization, scheduling, and spatialization. The tooling, however, is coming coming later. So a new underlying audio system for the entire thing that is DOTS friendly. That's cool. Another one we've got is polymorphic serialization coming in 2019.3. Serialization is the process of taking your running code or objects or whatever and saving them, basically the state of them, to disk, or vice versa. Deserialization is the process of taking it from disk and turning it back into live objects. Generally, you can think of this as, how do I save stuff and how do I restore saved stuff? You use serialization. The problem is serialization didn't always survive everything, so this maintains object references that didn't previously survive the serialization process. So you see, when you serialized this jungle class, it didn't necessarily understand what a cat was, so it didn't serialize the cat class. Now it can. So it should make saving state a lot simpler. Editor speed improvements in 2020.1. Improve the performance of the editor across the board to create a responsive, intuitive, and predictable experience. Nobody's going to say no to that. We got some summaries in the slides of some of the key points that are coming through. Highlights there. DOTS Physics is going to get IL2 CPP player support. Havix Physics, as we mentioned earlier on, Physics is being upgraded to PhysX, that is, being upgraded to 4.1 with cloth improvements. We got a lot of improvements on the packaging side of things. We've seen most of them already. The packages have become a whole lot more important, so they're getting a lot of functionality and focus. And then we got 2020.1 improvements. Again, we've got editor speed improvements. We got nice improvements to the profile, again, the functionality you can do there. Data flow graph that's DOTS compliant. Data flow graph is what's being used right now for the shader, visual shader, and the visual programming stuff, and a couple of other things. It's also going to be used for audio and animation, as you can see there. And then again, more package management, including the ability to filter by categories. So that's definitely nice. Now, this is one that I think people are going to really cheer about. In 2019.3, there is a new version of the asset pipeline. The asset pipeline is the underlying importer for all the various different textures and models and so on in your system. They did a ground-up rebuild of the asset database to reduce importing and enable fast platform switching, and this will ultimately go live in 2020.1. So in 2019.3, you'll be able to see a preview of it. And in 2020, the new importer should just be the new importer. So this is going to have some nice ramifications. So it's going to have faster importing and less obtrusive importing. And this is another neat thing that's coming 2019.3 as experimental, is you can actually only import assets as you need them. So you see here, they've got like an external list of assets. You go ahead, you use something from it, then it will import it. Until you use it, nothing happens. So this is going to make it so you can have modular assets out there organized in your project without being like a bloat and a huge slowdown. And the cool thing is it also runs in the background, so it doesn't pop up a dialogue and stop you from working. The accelerator creates a local cache of your remote project to speed up teamwork. Version control improvements, including on the UI side, all kinds of underlying version control systems, including Perforce and VCS. Git. Optimized play mode. This was covered in the 2019.3 beta version. We've got a lot more control over what happens. Minimize the time to enter play mode by customizing how Unity rebuilds and reloads constantly. When you hit that play button, you can now control what it does. You see here we got options: recompile and continue, recompile after finishing playing, and stop playing and recompile. We've also got the device simulator. This is actually quite cool. So if you want to mock up what your thing would look like on a phone or with a notch here or different devices, you got a really tight simulation. You can kind of set up traits of what a simulated device is going to be like. It's not as good as running on the actual device, but it goes a long way. If you use the iOS simulator, you got an idea what you're dealing with here. It'd be interesting to see the categories of devices that are predefined by them. UI design, I actually did a video on this. I did it specifically in 4K, so you can see now how it looks in HDPI support. But they've changed out the fonts. They've changed the way that controls work. They're starting their own tweak of the UI, and 2019.3 is the best looking version of Unity yet, hands down. And you can see here, they've got a preview, and it's concept design only of what is coming in 2020. Notice no versions, but they are going to be redoing the user interface, bringing workspace, smarter panels, and in-context tools to your creative process. Now, what you're seeing here, this doesn't mean this is what you're going to get, because this looks like it was taken straight out of Photoshop or Illustrator or something. But it's long overdue for an update. And part of what they did in the last version of the new font and the clearing their controls and so on really did help, but this is kind of evolving that. So you're going to have a nicer looking overall experience. Prefab mode in context, edit your prefab assets in isolation, but retain the context of your scene. So more improvements along that line of breaking your workflow up into prefabs. Quality of life improvements, including quick search, improved presets, and other scene tooling. Single UI solution, so UI elements for both the editor and runtime with CSS-like styling and visual authoring environment. We'll get back to that in just a second. But there we go, we're back to it. So this is a new experimental feature, UI Builder, coming in 2019.3. Visually authored workflow for both the UI for the editor and the runtime. So you can create UIs that you're going to use directly inside of like sort of plugins or tools or whatever, or for your game's actual runtime. So you're getting UI creation tools. You see it's a very CSS style approach. This is cool to see. And then 2020.1 preview of the new visual scripting system. This only works on top of the Dots technology stack. It's their implementation of blueprints, basically. I did a video specifically showcasing visual scripting, so it's going to be in preview in 2020.1, but it's already out there as a preview package. So if you want to check out visual scripting, check out that video, and you can download it for yourself right now. But it's going to formally be included in 2020.1 as a preview. As I mentioned early on, Dots has all kinds of subsystems that's going to be coming for it. Another one that's coming is a new animation system that runs on Dots. We got freeform animation coming in 2020.1 preview, including the ability to modify skeletal animation and edit motion capture. On top of that, there's Kinematica, which enables you to create character data from raw unstructured motion data. A new environmental system, preview package of the new non-destructive layering system. And you see it down here down the side. That's pretty cool. So you can create layers for your environments or your trains or whatever. Shader graph, this has already been pretty fully covered. Here you can see that that effects graph thing, that the underlying layer part that's also being used in the visual programming, going to be used in the new Dots editor they mentioned earlier on, and so forth. Better integration allows artists to work from shader to visual effects, taking full control of their work. I did a video on shader graph as well if you're interested in checking that out. 2D tools got a lot of love. 2019.3, they are now considered production ready and ready for use. Also got support for shader graph. There's a few other updates to 2D that we will get to in just a second. Some film and TV pipeline stuff. I'm mostly going to gloss over this because this is mostly a game development channel. So we got a bit of a summary of all of the things here. The things I really want to highlight, again, we got updates to the UI in general, including HDPI support, which is sweet. 2D tools, this is all the stuff that's new. 2D animation, sprite shape, pixel perfect camera with Cinemachine support, PSD importer and tile mapper support there. Those are all now considered production ready and good to go. And on top of that, we have sprite swapping in experimental stages. And the 2D render now can use the universal render pipeline. We'll get back to universal render pipeline. If that sounds new to you, it isn't. So yeah, mostly covered all of that stuff. 2020, see just kind of improvements across the board. 2D tile map improvements include improved scriptable brushes, improved tile palette, 2D shadow support, and tile map extras as a package. And then of course visual scripting is coming. And then the other cool one for 2D gamers, and there's a lot of 2D love in here, is the 2D sprite shape, deformations based sprite shape. So you can do things like probably use a tessellated mesh on top and deform your sprites. And yeah, we got a lot of other things coming here. Most of those were covered already. So as I mentioned earlier on, the universal render pipeline, that might sound new to you. This is a rebranding they did in 2019.3. The universal render pipeline, or URP, is actually the lightweight render pipeline. So now it's URP as opposed to lightweight render pipeline, although I don't think they want anyone calling it URP. It is basically the same thing though. This is the I won't call it the low end, but it's the broadest targeted pipeline. So this is what you would use to target the Nintendo Switch, mobile phones, low-end desktop machines, and so on. All new performant post-processing effects and support for shader graph and visual effects graph work. And the HDRP, or Hadoop, is now at a preview, 2019.3, so it is considered ready for production use. This is the one you use for higher-end machines, things like the Xbox One, Xbox One X, PS4 Pro, and so on. Real-time ray tracing dropped in 2019.3, bringing out the finest visual quality, and it's built on top of HDRP. So that means you cannot use real-time rendering and URP together. We got virtual texturing. This one I think used to be called mega texturing, but this is the ability to stream in huge textures from very large environments. What it does is reduces texture memory overhead, integrates with new environments, and you can also integrate it with the shader graph. So if you've got like this huge texture in like kind of a scaling world, something like, you know, Skyrim, but better looking, a virtual texturing could be a star for that kind of thing, streaming in as you need it. Yeah, we'll get out of the fine-tuned details. Keep going on. Oh yeah, it's got some cool, neat stuff coming. 2D graphics, 2D lighting, 2D shadows, and so on. Those are all in 2019.3, mostly in experimental versions. And then we've got a few other things coming, like rigid body 2D hard axis constraints and per frame auto simulation objects in 2D in the future. And the ERP is getting the deferred renderer and shadow mask support. Now, deferred renderer might be a big deal here because I think that is actually a prerequisite for most VR-based applications. And then the HD render pipeline is getting some new functionality like an eye shader, HDRP optimizations, and HDR output on the consoles. And 2D graphics are getting soft shadows in experimental form in 2020.1. All right, moving just along before my voice gives out. Now, this one is kind of cool. And they're also doing something built on the idea of dots. It's kind of a subset or a microset of Unity. It's a small runtime with a small, I don't know where they're going to draw the line for what you can use and can't use to make it work with Project Tiny, but this is to create really small games. So bringing the most optimal file size and load times for hyper-casual 2D and 3D games across mobile and web with HTML5. So if you didn't want to make these 30 megabyte hangman games, that's where Project Tiny is going to come in. We got the Unity distribution portal. I did a video on this. Basically, it's a way to kind of set up, DLC and deploy your game to various different stores and manage it from one location, but sell it on multiple stores. Now, this isn't stores like the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. This is like Korean game markets. It allows you to get into markets you probably wouldn't have thought about and manage your games across them. So it's kind of a way of entering more markets easily. We got Stadia support. Stadia is Google's streaming console. Who knows how that's going to turn out? I'm kind of not really that. I'm not a Stadia guy, so I just don't think that the world is ready for it right now in terms of infrastructure. AR Foundation 2019.3 has support for Magic Leap and HoloLens AR devices or augmented reality devices. Unity as a library. This is sweet. This actually shipped in 2019.3, the initial beta, and enables you to actually embed Unity inside of an application. So if you wanted to have like a sub-renderer window, or you wanted to access the netcode or that kind of stuff, you can actually call upon Unity as if it was any other class library. So you can see you can use Unity inside of a traditional style application. So you got AR launched directly inside of your, normal Xcode or, Android Studio project. And then you just kind of invoke Unity as libraries. For native apps, embedded Unity as its own library. Definitely cool. Improvement to the content distribution. Multiplayer matchmaking is interesting. They're moving into this networking space, including the next part, player identity, which is... this seems to be the next battleground. Epic are going for it. I think Microsoft is pretty hardcore on this. Sony are already in there. They kind of want to have a centralized identity system. They're going to be hosting it for you if you so choose to use the Unity system. On top of that, they also announced that Apple logins can be used with it. It's kind of coming at a later point. You see deployments, we got improvement, iteration times on IL2CPP. IL2CPP, if you do not know, is their way of creating CPP code out of intermediate language. So kind of you can get native performance instead of having intermediate language, the output from a traditional C# application. The incremental garbage collector is out of experimentation. This one is basically a garbage collector that runs more often, so it spreads it out so you don't have these performance lags when garbage collection kicks in. And the new input system is at 1.0. The input system is available as a package. It's a way of abstracting away keyboards. So you can handle, you can do move left and have that map to moving the mouse to the left, hitting the A key, or hitting the left thumb pad, for example. And Stadia support again. So there you see mobile sign in with Apple support is in preview, also retroactively in preview. Most of the rest we covered here. There's some really cool smaller details here, like Logcat integration. So if you're using Logcat on your Android deployment, you can now actually print to it from a Unity app. OpenGL ES was deprecated on iOS because Apple's Apple. We got that device simulator we mentioned earlier on. That looks pretty sweet. So those are the big guys there right now. And that is most of it, I think. I don't think we're going to have any major surprises. So once again, we get back to this nice little summary application of the things in action, and it's a good way to kind of summarize some of the cool things that are going here. So in this announcements that I think are really cool, LiveLink is definitely a high end. Like that's going to be improving a lot of workflows because you can basically tweak and redesign your levels without having to do a full rebuild. That's definitely neat. Game objects to automatically be converted over to entities. It'd be interesting to see how well that actually works out. Could provide a good flow or workflow migration path for people that aren't necessarily ready to jump on with this whole dots thing yet. Whole bunch of improvements on the dots end of things because basically they had to. They're doing an in-place upgrade. They're replacing the whole game object code with dots code, and all of this dot stuff is kind of fundamentally uncompatible with the way that a lot of the game object stuff works, so they had to write their own audio, their own physics, their own animation, their own networking, and so on, and that's what we were seeing big time in this release. So we're seeing dots become more viable, and again, I think they said what the whole Dots ECS underlying system is going to be ready for production in 2020.1. But we're still going to be waiting on a lot of these things to fully mature. So I don't know if anybody's really going to technically be able to use it yet. And you can sort of tell how much of a difference it is by the way they split this down. So you got Unity apps and you have Dots Unity apps. So they basically did this in-place upgrade of their game engine. You throw in the whole programmable pipelines on there for the ERP and the HDRP. That's they managed to make a brand new game engine side by side with their existing game engine, and we're kind of slowly getting all of the pieces together that the new Dots stuff is actually almost ready to be used live. I'd be interested to hear what your opinion on Dots in general are. That's kind of like the underlying thing here, but there is some cool tools across the board. That new simulator thing, that looks pretty sweet. A lot of the new 2D functionality is definitely looking kind of nice. These new flow graphs, the visual scripting, the visual shader creation, and so on. It's all some pretty nice stuff. So there is where Unity is going. I do wish some of the UI stuff was a bit more priority. I do find Unity kind of an eyesore. But again, a lot of the improvements that went into 2019.3 really did help, including just the minor font change. So I'm curious to hear what you think of this roadmap. Anything new or shocking on there that really stands out to you, or pretty much par for the course? That's it. Talk to you all later. Goodbye.